Thank you, everybody. And now we have to elect a clerk. Our current clerk is Christina Silberman, and she is not here. So, I mean, we can just easily re-elect her without her even knowing about it, right?
Good deal.
Would someone be willing to nominate Christina for clerk?
I nominate Christina Silberman for clerk.
And do I have a second?
I will second that.
Okay. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Okay, we're all set with our officers for another year. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing. We have an interpretation decision appeal as allowed in Chapter 315.77.b1 and Chapter 232-11. Justin Levesque of 16 Hopes Way, Douglas Mason of 11 Hopes Way, and Gregory Goding of 12 Hopes Way have filed this appeal regarding issuance of building permit number 24-148 issued on June 17, 2024 for installation of a 48-panel solar array on a dual-axis tracker issued to Kevin and Dwight Deckelman of 135 Tuttle Road as shown on Tax Assessor's Map R4, Lot 15A in the R1 Rural Residential Zone. Before I start this, I would like to read for everyone the rules of procedure for the board, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. This will take a minute, but I think it's important that everyone know what our rules of procedure are before we get started. First off, no business may be transacted by the board without a quorum consisting of 4 members. The concurring vote of a majority of those voting, but at least 3 votes, is necessary to grant any application. If any matter fails to receive a favorable vote of a majority of the board members voting, the application will be deemed to have been denied. All testimony must be presented at the podium so it can be recorded. Testimony will be videotaped. The videotape will be available for inspection at the town office during regular business hours. Applicants will first state their case and may present testimony and offer evidence. The burden of proof is on the applicant to present all the evidence the board needs to determine whether the project will comply with every applicable requirement of the ordinance or the appeal demonstrates that the ordinance is not met. Applicants are strongly encouraged to provide with their written submissions all evidence in support of their application. Following the conclusion of the applicant's case, members of the public may present testimony and offer evidence in the following order. First, those in favor of the application. Second, those opposed to the application. And third, those neither for nor against the application. Applicants may then offer rebuttal evidence. Parties acting through the chair may cross-examine witnesses. The chair may limit irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious testimony. Members of the board may ask questions at any time with the permission of the chair. At the conclusion of the rebuttal evidence, the public portion of the proceeding will be closed, and the board will rule in the application pursuant to the applicable provisions of Cumberland's zoning ordinance and Maine law. The chair may reopen the public portion during deliberations if the chair determines it necessary to do so in the interest of a full and fair hearing and a complete record. After a decision has been made, the board will not entertain a new appeal of similar import concerning the same property until 1 year has elapsed from the date of the decision, unless the chair believes that an injustice was done because of a mistake of law or misunderstanding of fact, or if the chair believes a change has taken place in some essential aspect of the case sufficient to warrant a reconsideration of the appeal. The board's procedures are also governed by Maine law and Section 315-77 of the Cumberland Code. So thank you for listening to that, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Mr. Longley, before I turn it over to the appellant, would you like to give an introduction to this matter? Or?
Sure, I'll give a very brief introduction. On or about June 17th, a proposal was brought before me for issuance of a solar permit, and it's kind of a unique one. It's on a pole. Most of the solar permits I've issued, and I've issued hundreds of them, have either been on roofs or in adjacent to the property on the ground. And this is the first pole-mounted solar that I have approved. When I did that, I reviewed down through the Chapter 232 of the Solar Energy Systems Ordinance that was adopted by the council several years back. And in my opinion, it met the requirements. It met the 15-foot setback from a side or rear yard line, and it was limited by my condition of the permit to be no greater than 24 foot in height. This moving on axis type solar system has the ability to go higher than that. But my discussion with the applicant was to limit it to no greater than flat. and at the flat level, it's no greater than 24 feet. So that was a condition that I placed to comply with the solar energy systems ordinance. I don't have a lot more to say other than I reviewed it, I approved it. The abutters were given notice that this happened, and they were given notice that my decision, if I had erred in my granting of the permit, was appealable. And they're here tonight to
Okay,
offer their evidence.
thank you for that introduction. With that, Mr. Levesque, is that you?
That is me.
Could you introduce yourself and go ahead and give us your arguments and presentation as to why Mr. Longley incorrectly issued his permit?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Minahan.
Sorry.
Should the applicant be the one that goes first?
No, I don't think so, because this is an appeal, this is the appellant, and so they're appealing the building permit. I think they need to present their case since the burden's on them.
Well,
Are you saying?
Well, that means that we have to give deference to the code enforcement officer's decision?
Yeah, I think so, because the burden is on the appellant to show that, I mean, I think this is an interpretation appeal, so.
But I think, I thought this is a de novo
Yeah.
application, in which case wouldn't the applicant go first and present?
No, because he already granted their permit, right? And so we wouldn't be here but for the appellant challenging the approval. So I don't think that the permittee can really legitimately be asked to go first, since they haven't heard, I mean, they've seen the written presentations, but the appellant is saying, I think that the code enforcement
No, I
officer is
understand,
wrong.
but doesn't the applicant, and doesn't this say the applicant, will first state
Yeah,
their
although-
case and
Yeah, although this is written,
testimony?
this is written as if the appellant is the applicant, right? Because he's the applicant to us for an interpretation appeal.
I see what you're saying, but if it's in other words, doesn't the applicant still have to prove that what he's applying for satisfies the requirements?
Well, possibly, but I think that they can still, well, that's a good question, Andrew. I mean, I guess,
Because once an appeal occurs, then there is not an approval of the application until it goes through this process.
I'm not sure about that. Is there some of the ordinance that says the permit is revoked when it's appealed, or is it stayed? I think the permit is still in existence. It's like an appeal of any state agency, a permit. The permit stays in force unless the court stays it. Unless the court issues a stay of the permit, then the permit stays valid until a court actually overturns it. So I think the permit is valid right now. So
So is this an issue of who goes first or who has the burden?
Who has the burden?
of proof?
It's both, but I mean, whoever has the burden is going to go first.
I mean, I think from our perspective, it's an interpretation appeal, and so,
But we don't know all the facts yet. I mean, some of the facts might be in dispute.
yeah, they might be, right.
But wouldn't it, for instance, doesn't the applicant first have to show that whatever is being asked for is within the ordinance, restrictions of the ordinance? You
So
have to show that it meets the setback
I think from a
requirements of the height.
prima facie matter, the code enforcement officer has determined that the application meets the requirements of the ordinance. The appellant has raised two issues in his appeal, their appeal. The appellants have raised two issues in their appeal as to why it does not. I think that as a matter, I don't think that the applicant needs to, our jurisdiction is limited. There's a case, in fact, I sent it out to the appellant, to Christina earlier in the week, because our ordinance says that the appellants, that applicants must make their arguments in their appeal, right, the written appeal. They have to make their arguments in the written appeal. And a couple of years ago, the law court issued a decision saying that when a board like ours heard orally from the applicant a different argument, an argument that was not raised in the appeal, a new argument they'd come up with in the meantime, that the board did not have jurisdiction to consider that argument. Because the ordinance says you have to raise your arguments in the written appeal, you have to actually, and if you didn't, then we are not authorized to hear those other arguments. Now, there may be some gray area there. I think we could sort of sua sponte, take make a decision like that on our own, but the applicant's not allowed to raise additional arguments, at least according to this law court case. So what that suggests to me, Andrew, is that I think that the prima facie matter, the CEO decision here is that the application meets all the ordinance requirements. And we have to look at the arguments that the appellants are raising to decide whether, based on those arguments, he was wrong. I don't think the applicant needs to show, for example, that all the other requirements of the solar ordinance are met because the appellants aren't raising those issues here.
So we would give deference then to Bill's decision, is what you're saying?
I think so. I mean, this is not this is an interpretation appeal, so yeah, I think we would give deference. I mean, I'm not sure you'd call it deference. I think it's just that he has made those findings. They're not being challenged, so I don't think they're at issue here. So I don't think the actual permittee needs to address those issues. I guess you could say it's deference to him. I mean, I guess I'm not willing to say that necessarily. I don't think that, so if, under your line of thought, if there were an ambiguity right in the ordinance, where does the setback apply to? For example, does the setback apply just to the poles where it hits the ground, or does the setback apply to the edges of the panels, right? If Bill took the position that it applies to just where it hits the ground, I don't think we have to defer to that. I think that we can decide that it doesn't. It applies to the edges, or whatever we decide, whatever we as a group just think makes the most sense. So I guess I don't think we give him deference. I don't think that that's necessarily the same thing here as whether, if it's de novo, it would mean that, and I think it is, that the applicant can present new evidence, which I think the applicant can present. So it is a de novo appeal, meaning the applicant can present new evidence, they can have witnesses, because he didn't allow in his procedure for any neighbors to, before he issued the permit, he didn't allow them to present evidence. And so that's part of what we're doing here, to allow the submission of additional evidence.
Okay, so I mean, in terms of the order, I think it's fine, but it may come up again when we discuss this in terms of where the burden lies.
Okay. Any other comments before we get started? Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Mr.
No, that's
Levesque.
okay. It's good to get it sorted out. Thank you. So I have a presentation. I'm the first name on the appeal notice, so I'm going to go first. I have about 30 slides here. Probably won't take more than 20, 25 minutes. I've left out a lot of things like the images of the tracker, visual descriptions, overhead pictures. That was all in the 90-page packet posted online. So I've left out a lot of that. I'll do my presentation first, and then Mr. Goding and Mr. Mason will be following after. And here we go. So just thinking about the outline of the case, and Mr. Manahan, I did get that email from you, so I'm trying to really stay on point with that. There's basically 3 parts to our appeal form, and I'm going to be talking about these 3 parts here in this order. First, I want to talk about the site plan that was originally submitted with the application on June 17th, as Mr. Longley states. I'm actually not going to be focusing a lot of time on that site plan. It's been having a lot of evolution, especially in the last few days, and it appears to be moving forward in kind of a positive way for everyone. So that's good, but I will still be talking about it. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about the structure height. We had a description that the device, the structure, tilts upward, and it can actually go to a maximum height of over 30 feet, which exceeds the current ordinance for solar structures in Cumberland, which is at 24 feet. Mr. Longley did mention that the structure will be flat and be restricted to being flat and not tilting or moving. I'm going to outline how by its very nature and its very design and its operation by the manufacturer, it does need to move, tilt, and rotate according to how it was designed and built for it to be safe. So we're going to talk about that. From that safety issue, the height will be violated. Lastly, too, I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty currently in the Chapter 232 ordinance that we have here in Cumberland for solar, and I ask this board here to help us interpret some of this uncertainty that I'm about to present today. So I thank you all for being here. All right, this is my second slide. This is just a brief snapshot of Chapter 232. The solar ordinance in the beginning. I just have the title there, orienting us that it's Chapter 232. Section 9 is really where we're focusing a lot of this presentation and our appeal on. So I just want to orient folks that side setbacks we've already discussed, 15 feet from any lot line. And how pole-mounted solar energy systems have maximum height of 24 feet. I want to point out too, this section 232-9 on dimensional standards, there's no other language quantifying array size in this section. These two metrics, height, 24 feet max, and side setback, as well as the other rear and front setbacks that are discussed elsewhere in the Chapter 315 of the ordinance, are the only quantifiable metrics allowing for size of these structures. Okay, this is a site plan and setback portion of the presentation. Again, not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. It's been evolving the last few days. Other folks in the audience might want to speak about it. And again, there's a lot of info in your packets. I do have this picture kind of orienting ourselves to the general area. This laser pointer here, I can try to use it. So here's the Deckelman household. This is Hope's Way. This is the Goetings. This is the Masons. This is my house. You'll notice there's 33 solar panels on top of it. This is not an anti-solar presentation. I'm a huge advocate of solar, and I applaud everyone who wishes to adopt it. This is more so of a project of a commercial nature in a rural residential zone affecting height, maximum height, and possibly setback requirements. The structure that we're talking about here, it's going to go somewhere in this area here, conveniently in the backyard of the Deckelmans and within full view of these three houses. Front yard full view. This is a site plan. We might refer to it later. Others in the audience might want to refer to it. I just stuck it here. I'm sorry, it's not a site plan. It's a snapshot of the original survey of the area by Owens and Haskell a few years ago. But just to come back to that general area, solar tracker over here. Here's Hope's Way here. Again, might need this later, so I just stuck it in here for reference. These are two snapshots from the original permit submitted to Mr. Longley on June 17th. I wrote a letter to Mr. Longley and various members of the town council on June 29th after becoming aware of this permit. Most concerning to me was the lack of detail in this site plan submitted based on the size of this structure. We have here a dot, does not give a lot of detail as to the structure size, if that means the pole or the entire array. At any rate, I zoomed this in here. We have setback measurements in 4 cardinal directions from that dot, missing information at these 2 closest corners. Concerning that in the actual application for the permit, that thought was not taken in. And I pointed this out in the letter, and that letter was shared with multiple parties. It was shared with the Deckelmans. It was shared with Northeast Solar Trackers, expressing our concerns. And movement is actually going forward on a much more detailed site plan. It's great that this is moving forward, and it's very concerning to me to make sure full setback requirements are met, especially for a device that is actually designed to move in a 270-degree axis, because if it abuts very close to the property lines and the setbacks are possibly violated in one of the conformations that the structure is in based on the sun, then that has potential to taint the deeds of especially the Masons who abut the property directly, but also my deed and also the Goetings deed. We all share right of way across the Masons' property. I don't want my deed compromised in any way, shape, or form, however minor, if the setbacks were in fact violated, especially if the structure were to move. This is an evolution of site plan. This is available online in the 90-page document. So on June 10th, Mr. Longley, I believe, and Mr. Longley could speak more to this if you wanted, but this is a document, an image showing that, okay, there are 2 points here and there's being more of an effort to make sure setbacks are being met based on the size of the structure. And in this snapshot here, on the right, it's a top-down view of the size of the array. It shows the measurements in both width and length. It's about 1,139 square feet per my calculations. This length here, 27 feet, 5.75 inches. So just to give you an idea, this is meant to, I think, overlay on that. So that's the purpose of that. So this tracker, it's supposed to stay flat. Unclear if it's going to move along this rotational axis, but hopefully we can get more information about that. And I'm hoping that as site plans continue to evolve, that care is taken. If the device is going to function as it's fully intended, it's going to rotate to track the sun in a 270-degree axis. As it rotates, when the sun moves to capture more sunlight, this static representation superimposed on that will in fact move and has potential for the corners to impact setbacks and sight lines. So it's kind of it's slightly disconcerting that the images provided so far have no language that if in fact the structure were to be fully implemented as designed, that this movement is not taken into account with these site plans. It would be less of an issue if the structure was more so on the Deckelman's property, but it abuts right close to the Mason's property line, so it is a concern. This is the latest plot plan that was submitted this week. Bill emailed it to me. It's in the packet. Mr. Longley emailed it to me. It's in the 90-page packet posted online. And it is showing more detail as to where the structure is actually going to be placed, which is good. There's a blown up those two red dots, those two corners, showing some measurements to those setbacks. So an attempt is being made to address this concern. I still have other concerns about rotational aspects of the device. It is really interesting, however, that this permit was submitted on June 17th and approved that same day without actually thinking about the care required for the size of a structure, and with those two red points I pointed out, and here it is over 40 days later, and we're still having site plans being submitted and refined.
Mr. Levesque, could I just interrupt for a second? When you say you have some concerns about the rotational aspects, are you suggesting that if it rotates, if the, I'll say the northwest corner or whatever, or well, actually, if I'm on the ground, but that upper left corner there, if that rotates to the right, you're saying it might be within 15 feet of that dot over?
Yeah, so it's static as it is now, right? So the sun roughly in this area sets over here, and, I'm sorry, rises here, sets over here, Tuttle Road is over here.
Yep.
So if it's static there, as the sun moves across the sky throughout the day, we're not even talking about rising up in the air right now, we're just talking rotation along
Right.
along the ground, like this.
So that corner,
corner.
that corner's probably fine, right? Because that's never going to get closer than it is right now to that lower left. But the upper, or where's the?
The way I view it is that the pole would be here,
Yeah.
and this bottom corner. So if these two fingers are the corners, so if it rotates, it could possibly impede on setback. It's kind of a minor point, but it's just something.
No, it's an important point. I'm not sure I'm totally understanding, though, where the corners are. That rectangle, the corner where, well, so where it says 22, the upper 22 between the big dot and the straight edge.
This big dot.
Yeah, that's a property line?
Correct.
Okay.
So thinking back to a few images earlier.
Yes.
With those two red dots on the snapshot I submitted, there's concern here. That is one of those. Red
So if it rotates in a clockwise fashion, that corner would be almost certainly closer than 22 feet to that dot, right?
That's how I interpret it, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. That's what I want to understand.
And that corner there is that other red dot on my other image.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no. I welcome the questions. It's great. The permit was approved the same day on June 17th, as I mentioned. I would like to point out that in Chapter 232 in Section 7, there is provisions for permits not necessarily needing to be approved the same day, there are provisions for permits to be reviewed within 10 days. So the permit did not need to be approved in the same day. Additional aspects could have been thought about it, which I will be bringing up in this presentation, namely aspects regarding International Residential Code, Section 324, that deals with standards for roof-mounted, ground-mounted, pole-mounted photovoltaic systems. There are some additional risks that I'm going to be pointing out in this presentation, but 10 days review could have happened with this. There could have been an additional site plan detail asking. It took a letter from me on June 29th to spark the need for more detailed site plans. So this is the second part of my presentation regarding height of the structure. These are snapshots from the actual permit application. It was really very confusing to me, actually, the original permit. There's language in there that it's going to be 30 feet, 2.5 inches at its max, and it's 1,200 square feet. However, it's not going to exceed 24 feet in height. Mr. Longley explained this with the flat aspect. We'll explore it a little bit more, but as designed, it's supposed to go above 30 feet. Especially with the technical drawings provided in the permit. So this is page 4 of the permit, and Mr. Longley made some highlights in this permit. The highlights are his own. So basically communicating that when the structure is flat, that far left view, it's about 20 feet high. So it's in compliance with the 24-foot height requirement. If the structure, as it's designed to operate, tilts along its height axis, as it tilts, it will raise up in the air. This is an estimate right here. I'm just putting that number there, basically explaining at 23.9 feet, if this angle denoted that, it would technically be in compliance, right? I don't know if that 7.4 degrees actually computes 23.9 feet, but it's just for example. So in these two images, the tracker is okay. However, if it were to go to its full height, it's no longer in compliance, and it violates the height ordinance for solar in the town of Cumberland at 24 feet. So this is an important slide. I'm going to refer back to this throughout the presentation. But from this picture, there's orientations where it could be in compliance, but there's a needed orientation for it to safely operate where it is absolutely not in compliance with height. So Mr. Longley mentioned that the permit is approved given that the structure will stay flat. So it's a structure with moving parts. It has software that governs its behavior. It's designed to rotate along the horizontal parallel to the ground, so it can follow the sun, as I mentioned when I step up there, and it's designed to tilt up to catch the sun's rays as it's lower in the sky. So by its very nature, how it works, it's supposed to move. If it stays flat, frozen in place, so it won't move and potentially violate setbacks or height, it's questionable how the structure can actually function safely. But here, we're talking about a structure that will stay flat. How will it stay flat? Are we promising that it's going to stay flat without any issue? Are we going to somehow bypass the structure's manufacturer software operation instructions and just have it stay static? While, I should point out too, there's a couple things in regards to the structure that actually make it function. There's the tracker itself, the software, the moving parts, the metal that holds all of those things, the metal that puts all of those things together. Then there are the actual solar panels mounted on the structure. So we're talking about having a structure completely flat, not moving, not functioning. The panels on top can absolutely be functioning, generating electricity and pushing electricity into the grid. But so I just wanted to point that out. There's essentially two separate things here. There's the panels and then there's the structure. But keeping the structure flat, are we going to weld it in place and not have the actual moving parts that it has by its nature functioning? So are we just going to let it lie flat and see what happens to it? Or will the structure still be allowed to tilt slightly thinking back to that second picture, just not more than 23.9 feet, will it be allowed to rotate to, and what about the setbacks, as I mentioned? So the structure comes from the manufacturer with an actuator that tilts it. It's essentially, it's an arm that tilts it all the way up in the air to ensure that it stays flat and static and does not go above 24 feet. Are we going to take that out? And we are the neighbors duly charged to monitor this height indefinitely and input this into our deeds for other property owners to monitor and call code enforcement or the town if there's an issue. I don't know. I want to ask too, can this structure even track the sun and operate in a mode that's either manual or not automatic as it's designed by the manufacturer? So this is a question that I wanted to ask. Could it even, it can generate power because the panels are themselves, the panels sit on top of the structure, but can the structure itself be manually adjusted in some way, shape, or form so it confirms and is flat all the time? Or can, in fact, maybe be designed to tilt in a specific orientation and be frozen in place so it is compliant with height? So I wanted to find more information out about how this works. So how I did that, looking at one of the pages of the permit, there on the precast concrete foundation page, there's a reference to Sun Action Trackers. So Sun Action Trackers is actually the company that manufactures these devices. Their American headquarters is in Texas, and they go by their American subsidiary is Sun Action Trackers. But it's a Korean company. It's called Peru. And if I'm wrong in any of this, Ryan, if you want to talk your part, absolutely. So I welcome that. But just doing the research as to how this operates, I went to these places. Tracker Model 2, called the PST-2AL, pretty sure. So this is an email, snapshot email from Sam Mason. So Sam is here tonight. Sam is the son of Doug Mason, one of the appellants. So we wanted to find out more information as to how this tracker can operate outside of a mode that it is intended to operate. So Sam writes, I'm interested to the info email of SAT Energy, Sun Action Trackers Company. I'm interested to learn a bit more about how the dual axis sun tracking works on this model. So each 48 module array, so a module here is a solar panel. So the tracker has 48 panels, it has 48 modules. There's a real-time solar tracking sensor to adjust the azimuth, so the rotational aspect, and the vertical to maximize energy output. So can we turn this feature off and instead manually set it to a particular direction with defined angles? With this, we could do that, and it would be in compliance with height, stay flat, and still be of use, generate power. Sam didn't get any response from the company after 5 days. So he wrote back. This gentleman, Pete Lipscomb, he works for Sun Action Trackers. He's their Director of Business Development. His LinkedIn profile is readily viewable online. He's worked there for about 8 years. He has a degree in mathematics. Give a very brief answer saying that there's no way to defeat the sensors that guide this device's behavior and set manual directions so it could possibly be in compliance with height and setback. And he wants to know if we're having a problem with a tracker. So this was kind of the beginning of our information gathering. So this kind of poses the question from a technical nature, can the structure even do what it needs to do to be in compliance? Can you set it in a manual mode and be safe? So there's a lot of marketing online on the Sun Action Tracker website, the American website for this structure. It's touted in many places on the web pages, and if we wanted to, we could easily go look at the web pages, and there's also a very nice PDF brochure that this structure is a commercial and agricultural tracker. So I say this because of the size of the structure and the fact that we're proposing to place it in a residential zone. So by its very description from the manufacturer, they're calling it a commercial structure. Now I want to segue into talking about something else as well. So, and this is verbiage from the website. These are snapshots, and the structure is touted by the manufacturer that it can operate in heavy snow regions, and it makes good ground clearance. And it has software requiring the structure to tilt to actually 60 degrees upward, so it sheds snow to keep the trackers working. Keep the trackers working and keep snow from accumulating. This is a snapshot from the 3-minute video from the Sun Action Trackers website. I'm not going to play the video for you, but it's touted a few safety modes that the automatic software that governs the tracker's behavior when it's operating as it should. These safety modes come into operation. There's wind mode and snow mode. So we're going to talk about 2 of these modes, and as it relates to International Residential Code 324-1. That's referenced in Chapter 232 of the Cumberland Solar Ordinance. These are more images from the PDF brochure from the Sun Action website and its webpage. So basically, when the tracker is flat, it's in wind mode, and it's safe. It's meeting code that it was designed for, and it won't get damaged, it won't break. So if the tracker is working fine, the weather is fine, and it's moving along the ground, and it's tilting, following the sun, suddenly there's a storm, the software automatically governs it. If the winds go above 45 miles an hour, there must be a little wind gauge attached to it. It goes into an automatic flat mode, so it's safe, and it won't have a sail-like effect and potentially lose structural integrity. So this is an automatic feature that the tracker requires to have as it's operating, as it's designed by the manufacturer. If we just weld it in place or freeze it in some way, shape, or form, it meets that. Great. So, but the tracker also has what's called the snow mode. So the snow mode sends the tracker into 60 degrees, so it'll shed the snow, so it's not blocking the panels anymore, but it's also a safety feature as well. And this is another snapshot from the PDF form online that it's utility, agricultural, and commercial nature. Getting back to that residential aspect thing. So these are now pictures of...
One question, Mr. Levesque. Could you just back up a second?
Yeah.
I just want to be clear that you say it's a safety issue. I'm just looking for, and maybe I'm just missing it, but is there something that actually says that the snow mode is a safety issue? It says to keep snow from accumulating. Are you sure that's a safety issue, or is it?
I'm going to get to that in
Okay.
a couple slides.
All right, thanks.
And we can come back to that point too. I'm going to cite parts of IRC 324 where it kind of talks about that. So this top image, this is from the Paru website. So Paru is the Korean company, the parent of the Texas Sun Action Trackers. So this is an actual picture, it's a marketing picture of the structure we're talking about here on the left against some stationary pole, non-moving pole trackers in a solar farm field. They're advertising that this tracker is exceedingly robust to survive snowstorms like this because it can tilt up and eventually the snow will shed, and if it's lying flat all the time, the snow will not accumulate it and possibly compromise the structure like it did for the pole-mounted solar panels pictured. This is an email I sent to Paru, the company, to actually try to get the manual for the product. A gentleman emailed me back. His name is Yi-Chan Kang. Basically said to me that he can't send me the manual because I'm not buying one. He did reference the YouTube video, the 3-minute video I alluded to, but I'm not going to show you. And I was asking him about the snow mode and tilting, because I was thinking if it's going to stay flat all the time and not going to move, what will happen with snow accumulation. Echan states, our dual axis trackers has a snow mode. When snow is detected, you can manually activate the snow mode. Okay, so here's some language that maybe a button can be pressed and the tracker can go that to get rid of snow. Tilts the panels 45 degrees. He goes ahead to mention that it's 60 degrees for the US. I don't know exactly why the two differences in degrees. It might have to do with specifics in the International Residential Code, Section 324, for safety and snow loads for this particular structure. I don't know, but I'm just pointing that out. He goes on to say, therefore, even with heavy snowfall, there's less risk of damage to equipment compared to a fixed installation, which is the image on the right. So I want to point out this image is actually on Peru's website. He sent me an additional image, which is basically the same thing. It's in the next slide. I'm not going to harp on it because you just saw it, but he pointed out some aspects of this. I guess this was actually a case study in Japan where they wanted to demonstrate that snow mode actually causes these dual axis trackers to shed snow compared to stationary panels that might have structural integrity issues with them. So moving on from that. So and these modes are governed automatically by the software. So it knows when snow is happening, it knows when wind is happening. There's a manual function to make it go into snow mode. So, and this is again a snapshot from the Peru website. When the product is switched to snow mode, module maintains the inclination angle to prevent any damages caused by snow. So here the manufacturer openly references that tilting to its full height is a feature to prevent against damage. So this is directly from the manufacturer. And then when wind speed exceeding the value is reached, it goes into that flat snow mode. So there's a few different ways that you can think about how this thing can operate. If it's flat all the time and it's not going to tilt at all, it's in wind mode. Great, it's protected against wind. If somehow it gets programmed to only tilt to the 23.9 foot level, then technically it's still in compliance, and if it's going with height at least, and if it's going to stay frozen at that 23.9 foot level in place, the software is off, what would happen if there was a wind event suddenly and the wind sensors on the device, part of the software, can't account for the wind because it's frozen and stationary, and the structure were to get damaged in that way. So you essentially can't have it both ways. If you're flat, you're in compliance with height, but you don't necessarily guard well against snow, but you guard well against wind. If you decide to have it slanted to 23.9 feet, okay, you're guarded slightly against snow, and if it's going to be frozen and not automatically move to track the sun, how will you guard against wind? So the point I'm trying to make is it has software that's designed to operate in a way to guard against both of these conditions, and for that it needs to go to its full height for it to be safe. So I want to bring up this point here. This is from Chapter 232-8 of the Cumberland Solar Code. I heavily referenced Chapter 232-9. This is a section right before, talking about standards and safety risk. So residential solar energy system shall be permitted only if the code enforcement officer determines that the system and its installation shall not present any unreasonable safety risk as outlined in International Residential Code, Section 324, including but not limited to weight, wind resistance, solar glare. I just highlighted. I'm not even going to talk about solar glare. I don't have time for that. If other people want to talk about it, that's okay. But if it's going to be flat all the time, so I looked at section R324 of the International Residential Code. This is available online. If you get a free account, you can view it for free 14 days. So the latest version, I believe it's a 2018 International Residential Code, the latest version was updated in January 2023. So what I'm trying to make the point here is that our Cumberland's own Chapter 232 references IRC Section 324 as being a key guide for eliminating against safety risks. In Section 324-3, referencing photovoltaic systems, they shall be designed and installed in accordance with a few other sections in the manufacturer's installation instructions. So this structure is designed to be installed and be turned on and be governed by automatic software that tracks the sun in a 270-degree arc throughout the day. So it has to move and it has to tilt for it to both track the sun, and if in the winter there was a snow event, to get rid of the snow, and also to automatically go into a flat mode to protect against wind. And here, it's not explicitly mentioned in section R324-3 about operating instructions, but it can be inferred that operating instructions are probably very important for its safety. So section R324 also mentions aspects about ground-mounted solar. It then goes to telling folks to look at section R301-1 about how pole or ground-mounted solar shall be constructed in a safe manner to account for snow loads and wind loads. So again, as designed to function in automatic mode, the designers are thinking about these two conditions and trying to meet this code. This is another snapshot from the Korean website about how the tracker uses optical real-time sensors, drives, actuators, track the movement, changes in altitude in real time. It has wind mode and snow mode, and it's guided by 13 patents and certifications from UL. So it was designed to meet specs by Universal Laboratories, which governs safety for many electrical things. So we're talking about operating it in a way that stays flat and does not conform to those requirements. Kind of making an intellectual leap here, but in the IRC code, I couldn't really find language about installing a tracker of this size and not operating it as it should. So I did find this section on appliances. I guess this could be thought about a very large appliance, but in Appendix D of the International Residential Code, it does state that for appliances to operate safely, installation and operating instructions need to be followed. So for this very large structure, we are not following its operating instructions. We're just going to make it sit flat. I want to come back to this point here. So even if it just lies flat all the time, it'll just melt off. Maybe the structure will be fine. I don't know. But what if I were to say I don't need GFCI outlets in my bathroom if there's an issue? I won't get them wet. I won't have any standing water anywhere. I don't need those even though GFCI outlets are to code. I don't need a railing on my second-story deck. I don't have any kids and I'm careful. Don't need that. I don't need this tracker to operate as it should. It can just lie flat all the time. I don't need smoke detectors in my house. I want to build this flat-roofed, modern 1,200 square foot barn and not buy trusses. I'll just build it and the snow will melt off. It'll be fine. The point I'm trying to make here is this structure uses automatic tracking with the two safety modes, wind and snow. It's integral to its safe functioning, so it meets safety provisions mentioned in IRC code, which Chapter 232 of the Cumberland Solar Ordinance directly references. Lastly, I'm going to talk about its size. And I incorporated some snapshots too from previous meeting minutes where the town was actually constructing Chapter 232. It's actually really interesting to read. So the town adopted Chapter 232 back in October of 2020. And they had a meeting and there's some comments put in. And all this stuff is posted online too in the 90-page packet. Here, the town defined residential solar system. It's an accessory to the residential dwelling units, so it's, it's next to the dwelling units, it's outside. The residential solar energy system complies with all space, height, and bulk requirements. So we've talked about height, and we've talked about space as it references to setbacks. Bulk requirements, I'm going to come back and talk about a little bit in a few slides. And I also want to talk about this key word here too, subordinate. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that the metrics to govern size of residential solar, there's only setbacks, and there's height. There's no wording on square footage at all in our current ordinance. And this is where this word subordinate I want you to remember and think about. And this was done as a snapshot of the meeting minutes from October, where they established this ordinance. So they had a specialist from Revision Energy at this meeting back in 2020 to provide input to this ordinance. It was a gentleman named Fortunat Mueller. He worked at Revision Energy at the time. He just had some comments here that this is a residential-only ordinance. Most of the towns that are considering solar ordinances are primarily focused on non-residential systems because that's where ambiguity exists. There's a lot of actual ambiguity in this Chapter 232 ordinance, which I'm going to talk about in a couple slides and then wrap up here. And again, I want to come back to the point that marketing from the companies that make this, it's a commercial and agricultural device, and this is a residential solar ordinance. So again, we saw this already. And these are the quantifiable metrics as to how we define the bulk requirements of a solar structure in Cumberland. Height and setbacks, side and front. If you go to section 232-6 of this same Cumberland code, a residential energy solar system is considered to be an accessory to any permitted residential dwelling unit. As such, going on, the residential solar energy system complies with all space, height, and bulk requirements outlined in section 232-9. Again, only a couple numbers, height and setbacks, no square footage. The only guide in this ordinance to size is subordinate. It's a qualitative word. Here, I asked ChatGPT to define bulk requirements because I wanted a better idea of it. So, how tall a building can be, okay, we have a metric on height. Setbacks, we have metrics on setbacks. How big the building can be in terms of its overall area. Our code is silent on this issue. We only have a word subordinate. So we're silent on size in our code, solar. And I point this out because it's really interesting, and this might not apply here, but at the time when the town was establishing Chapter 232, there was a provision for size. It was 900 square feet, and they took it out. Fortunat Miller says, most towns have used 1,000 square feet as the max, and made it clear this is the projected area on the ground. Because if you have something that's sitting on stilts, the area, and it's projecting, it's gonna have less area on the ground. So they took out the square footage thing completely. I don't know if that was an error or what, but Fortunat provides some guidance that maybe 1,000 square foot is a good barometer for what is residential solar versus maybe a commercial solar. Again, I got the square footage here if you forgot it. And the permit says 1,200 square feet, but I calculated 1,139 square feet in that height. So this board, this appeal board, on the appeal form that we filled out, the appeal board is here to address uncertainty. We have uncertainty in the bulk requirement limits, the overall square footage area of this structure. We have a qualitative word in section 6, subordinate. I pointed out to safely operate this structure and to meet IRC 324 and 301, it must tilt to operate automatically, based on weather conditions, go into wind and to snow mode. And it begs the question, if a solar structure is tall or taller than the buildings on the property, in snow mode, fully extended to height, it would be taller. It's no longer subordinate. So we have a bulk requirement size violation here. Because we had vagueness in size, I just wanted to link a couple pieces of language from ordinance dealing with RR1 and RR2 about how we need to provide safety, have wind and snow mode for this structure, adequate light and air, and coordinated development of unbuilt areas. What we have here is a commercial structure in a residential zone. We have the marketing from the manufacturer. We have an idea of size based on the word subordinate, and perhaps some guidance from a gentleman from Revision Energy. Just wanted to define agriculture here. It's for commercial purposes. So I got 2 slides left. This is my summary slide. And then, so we're here to get to the root of the issue regarding uncertainty. What is residential solar versus commercial solar, essentially, is the question. So I have this little continuum here. I mean, life exists on a continuum, right? We have residential on the left and we have commercial on the right. Give some examples of residential and where the authority lies, either with code enforcement or a planning board. We are smack dab in the middle of that yellow box, and we need this appeal board to cut through that uncertainty and give us some certainty. And based on what I've said here today, the active marketing online from the manufacturer, it's touted as commercial, industrial, agricultural. It's not subordinate to buildings in the area based on its very nature on how it needs to function safely per established international residential code. That's my point, trying to make that it's commercial. Again, summarizing everything I just said. So we had site plan imprecision, and again, that's being addressed and fixed, but only after prodding by myself and a few others. We're talking about safety, reference in Chapter 232 of Cumberland Town Code, mixing with International Residential Code 324 on solar. And if this were to remain completely flat and not work, automatically track the sun and account for different weather conditions, it would not be able to go into wind and snow mode and not be safe. And again, that word subordinate. This is my final slide. So when I first moved to Cumberland 10 years ago, I got this notice in the mail. I think it was 2014 or 2015. So it was a notice from the town because my back property line abuts Twin Brook. So the town moved a shed from the Tuttle roadside to the Greeley roadside. It's a 288 square foot shed. And this letter outlines that. And because I was in a butter, I got a notice that this shed was being moved. This shed, 288 square feet, required a minor staff review level project with others in the town, with planning board members. And I don't know exactly how it works. Other people could probably speak to it, but it was reviewed by more than one person. And it's interesting, the characteristics listed here. I mean, this is a document that's almost 10 years old now, but it seems these characteristics of giving people notice or having more than one town employee review something of this size, it seems based on what we know about the size of this structure, it's very similar to square footage of things discussed here, whether it's a new home or an impervious surface such as a parking pad, either between less than 1,000 square feet, it still requires multiple people to review. But even greater than 1,000 square feet, you need a major staff level planning review. And for something that's 1,139 square feet and rotating in the air, no staff review is required. So I'm just trying to put this structure in perspective with already established procedures for other things that require planning level review, which didn't happen here. That's it. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Levesque, appreciate it. Before I ask the board if they have questions, are the other appellants going to be presenting
Yes.
for your case
So
as
Mr.
well?
Mr. Goding and Mr. Mason have their own things to say, and they'll be stepping up here.
Can I ask a question? Like, just in the sense, the only abutter we have are the Masons. Their right-of-way does not abut our property.
Okay, well, you can address that in,
Okay,
I'm going
I
to,
don't know if it had any bearing. I mean, it just,
yeah, I mean, we'll, after the appellant's case and questions, then we'll allow
okay.
the permittee and representatives of the permittee to speak and address those issues. Before, does the board have any questions for Mr. Levesque now, or do you want to, if anybody does, you feel free to ask him now, or we could wait for the other, the rest of his case, which could theoretically address questions. Sure, go ahead, Mr. Black.
So, Mr. Levesque, you mentioned earlier in your presentation some concern with, I don't know if it was a right-of-way or an easement, some sort of access to your property.
Yeah, so Hope's Way is a private road that goes across, as I understand it. I haven't looked at my deed in a while, and, the Masons could speak to this probably a lot better than I could. So Hope's Way is a private road over Mason property. So I have a right-of-way on that road, and the road isn't on my property, it's on Mason property.
And does this proposed structure impact that in any way?
It does not impact moving in and out of the property. If it were to impact the setback limits, though, I'm uncertain how that would affect if I were to sell my home to another party and had that right-of-way language on the deed regarding the Mason's property. I don't know how that would work, but it is concerning, at least to me.
But does the proposed installation in any way,
No, it doesn't affect,
conflict
it does
or-
not affect the road
okay.
in any way, shape, or form.
Any other questions for Mr. Levesque? And you could ask them later if after, we'll have opportunities for further questions.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Levesque. And then I guess why don't we move on to either Mr. Mason or Mr. Goding? And please try not to repeat what Mr. Levesque said if you can. I mean, we've had an hour now on this part of it, so to the extent you can avoid repetition, we'd appreciate it.
I'm just going to bring up a slide for. Oh, hang on. There we go.
Hi, my name is Doug Mason. I've lived at 11 Hopes Way for 27 years. Can I go to the
Sure.
board real quick?
Actually, try to avoid that because we're
All
on
right, well,
tape. We're on tape, so if you can.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's the right-of-way on Hopes Way. That surveyed right-of-way is Mason property there.
This wants a laser.
What do I do?
Press that button. There you go.
So this is the right-of-way. That's Hopes Way. First, I would like to say that there was a lack of transparency on the enormous size of the solar tracker. The site also changed from various places on his property, and finally, it was decided that it would get the most solar exposure by placing it here at the mouth of the septic system. Right there. Mound of the septic system that our property wraps around on 3 sides. There is no tree interference. It's the first place on his property that sunlight hits and continues until the sun sets. That is 3 side setbacks on my property line, right in my open field and direct line of vision. The latest site plan submitted just days ago on August 5th makes me wonder why here. Dwight told me that this location was never an option because it was in the way of his zip line, which he did not want to remove. Plus, the solar tracker doesn't have the full sun exposure here, and he intends on maximizing it to its full potential. But apparently, it doesn't matter which plot plan was submitted, as long as it meets the setbacks. He's allowed to change the location. Placing this 48-panel dual-axis solar tracker there impedes our right to enjoy our open rural view of our property. In fact, Dwight even told my wife, "You guys are going to cuss me out every time you drive in your property." We spoke with our realtor, Linda McDonald, who came to assess our property, and we were told that the real estate aesthetics value of our house and our neighbors' houses on Hopes Way would be negatively impacted due to potential home buyers seeking the rural nature of Tuttle Road area. How long it would sit on the market and ultimately cause the price to drop. I haven't worked as hard as I have worked to build equity in my home to have it diminished by an industrial commercial-looking solar tracker that doesn't belong placed right in my front yard. Chapter 232 speaks of residential solar energy systems with 15-foot setbacks, just like for a shed, and also mentions bulk, but makes no reference to 1,200 square feet of solar panels suspended in the air on a 30-inch diameter pole. Should this application have been red flagged when it appeared on Bill's desk? This solar panel is the first of its kind in Cumberland and is so novel that there is currently no language in Chapter 232 that addresses its size. The Ordinance Committee expressed to us that this was because no one could have foreseen a panel of this scale being built in our town. Maybe it warranted additional time to get more eyes on it. Maybe the proposal should have moved to the planning board first, like our neighboring town of Freeport decided to do with this very issue. If this thing ever gets the green light somehow to become fully operational, as it is meant to, it will be a full year before all implications of solar glare effects on our properties, Hopes Way, and Tuttle Road. I want to close by reporting that earlier today, Dwight spray painted another new location for the panel just inside the 15-foot setback. I don't see. Right, it'd be right in there. The new possible location is roughly 105 feet from my bedroom window. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Any questions for Mr. Mason, or? Okay, anybody else? Mr. Goding? Or?
Thank you. My name is Greg Goding. My wife and I, Mary Ann, reside at 12 Hopes Way, the first house on the left. We've been there since 2008. I grew up in Bangor, Maine, left in 1981 to go to dental school in Philadelphia, where I met my wife, Mary Ann, and we stayed in Pennsylvania for approximately 20 years before we moved back to Maine, bought a practice up in Pineland Farms. We looked at several communities when we came back, Cumberland, Falmouth, Yarmouth, Freeport, and we both agreed that what we found in Cumberland was what we were looking for. It's a rural area, and it was close to amenities, and it kind of fit the bill. We've been very happy here for 16 years. I'm totally in favor of solar energy and I feel it would be a big part of our future in Maine going forward, so I'm not against solar energy at all. I'm totally opposed to the placement of a commercial-sized solar tracking system into our residential neighborhood. We have two great neighbors, as Justin mentioned. He has put solar panels on his roof, and he went the extra mile to pay for them to blend in, and they look great. And all of Justin's arguments, I believe, were very well thought out and very well stated today. I don't understand the approval at 24 feet because, as Justin aptly stated, all of the actions of this dual-axis system aren't to keep it flat. It's going to be moving around, and if that does happen, when it happens, who's responsible for reporting that? Do we need to call every time that goes above the 24-foot flat level? I went on to Northeast Solar Tracker's website and looked at the website. They've got several photos on their website, and all of the photos that they show are commercial and agricultural locations. There are no residential locations at all on their website and all the photos they showed. This would be the first of a kind. We all take great pride in our homes and in our yards, and we recently built a front porch on our house, and it directly will look right into the solar tracker, exactly straight on. That's all we're going to see now is the solar tracker. There are alternatives such as roof-mounted systems like Justin has, solar farms, solar gardens, and as Doug mentioned, at some point, we'll probably be selling our home and having this structure right next to our home, which is basically a commercial-sized solar tracker. Is going to greatly reduce the ability for us to sell our home, and I feel it's going to greatly devalue our home also by having this giant commercial structure in our wonderful neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goding. Any other questions right now? Again, we can come back to we will be coming back to the appellant at some point. Let's see, are you Mr. Deckelman?
No, I'd just like to speak if you're.
Not yet.
Oh,
We're
no
going to
public
be
comment.
opening up
Okay.
for others later. So the next step is to hear from the permittee, either Kevin or Dwight Deckelman or their representative. And Mr. Black, I was thinking about what you said about the burden of proof, and I agree with you. I think that the burden is on the permittee here to show that they meet the requirements of the ordinance to get this permit with respect to the issues that have been raised on appeal. So because it's a de novo hearing, meaning we're hearing it as if the evidence has not been presented yet, we have an obligation, I think, to listen to all the evidence, and the applicant, the Deckelmans, have a burden to show that they meet the requirements. In particular, as you've heard, the requirements with respect to property setbacks, the requirements with respect to the height, and whether it's a permitted use. So with that, if you could respond to what you've heard tonight and what's in the papers, we would appreciate it.
No problem.
And if you could state your name, yes.
My name's Ryan Keith. I'm the owner of Northeast Solar Trackers. We've been putting these up for just over a year now. But I guess I'm here to answer to the setback issue being one. We haven't put a shovel in the ground yet, so that's basically assumption. I was in the business of building houses for my entire life, and then I did actually code enforcement for a large portion of my life. So I know what I know the importance of setbacks, and I can guarantee you that these will not encroach setbacks. It is so important. When this structure is put onto the property, there will be no setbacks, rotating or not, that we are going to impede on from the corners of this unit. That's very easy to do. It's a 3-acre parcel. Going out there, he's got all the pins. We've got the subdivision, so the setback is a non-issue. We're not going to impede any setbacks. And if we do impede a setback, then it's our responsibility to take down the tracker and relocate it. And I can tell you that's not going to be it wouldn't actually be that difficult, but it's nothing I want to do. So we won't be moving it because we'd be putting it so it meets all setbacks. And then the height situation.
Wait, just 1 second, Mr. Keith. Before you move on to that, I think that the one issue with respect to setbacks that I heard being a potential issue is that question of the 22 feet if it were to rotate. And I understand you're saying you could move it, but where it's currently proposed, that is the proposal that is before Mr. Longley, if it were rotated, would that corner of the panels be any closer than 15 feet from that closest
It would
corner of the
not.
property line?
It would not.
And do you know what it would be, how far it would be?
It's about a 2.5 foot. So it might be 20 feet at the closest if it spins that way.
Yeah.
But that would be it. It would not encroach at that location. It would not encroach on the setbacks at all. So
Okay.
it'd be
All right,
fine.
go ahead.
So that's a setback issue. It will not encroach on any setbacks, promise you, won't. If it does, guess what? I'm taking it down and I'm moving it. And that's just what the responsibility of the town is, to make sure that it doesn't take place. And so I'll make sure, and again, it's an assumption because we haven't put a shovel in the ground yet, that to assume that a building is going to be built within the setbacks is a tough call to pull a permit back. But so that's a setback issue. The other issue is a height issue. And the Peru thing was brought up. He did great research, made it a little easier for me. But that Peru has a manual setting that I get to actually set the degree of the unit. So I get to set that. It will still rotate. I can set it at 20 degrees. I can set it at 22 degrees. I can set it to a perfect height. And I'll tell you that at my shop in Brunswick, just went there 2 days ago on a lift, measured to the highest point of one of my trackers, and it was 31'6". We set that tracker at a height of 9 feet off the ground so that my work trucks can get underneath it with ladders. So at the lowest point, it's 9 feet. That gives us 9 feet of variability. And that's if we don't recess one. We've installed one where we actually recessed it into the ground a little bit, little water well, and recess it down. It is very easy to set the height of it. It's not a safety issue. So when I set it, and it's a manual setting, I put in the degree, we literally throw a tape on it, and then we put it back into automatic because it will not tilt any further. Again, one of the trackers at my office I've set that way so that the dumpster guy can come in and he doesn't have to worry about it tilting down far enough that he's going to hit it. So I set the degree, and now that rotates and does not tip as far as the other ones. And so leaving it flat is also a setting that we can do. But most likely we'd leave it at a slight pitch so the snow and everything would whistle off. The height of it.
Mr. Keith, could I interrupt you again?
Yes, no problem.
Just because I want to, your point about putting the structure below grade is interesting to me, but as I read the ordinance, it says pole-mounted solar energy systems 24 feet as measured from the bottom of the pole to the tallest point of the solar energy system. So I'm not sure it matters for that purpose of height whether you're below grade. The question is bottom of the pole to the top. So just to be clear, I don't think that works for you.
Yep, that may not work, but the angle of the array is very maneuverable. It's a very easy thing to set in. I set every one of them when I install it, and it will still rotate and track the sun. The tracking part of it and avoiding the sensors is easy as well, because I pick whether or not it's a GPS or it's going to be a sunlight tracker. This unit has a sunlight tracker, so it'll actually go to the sun or the brightest spot in the sky, which is typically on a cloudy day, it does go flat because that's the brightest spot in the sky, but it will not exceed the parameters that I install of the angle when we initially incorporate the system. Did you have another question? So the 24 feet is so adjustable after the unit is installed on that angle. At any point, we can change it and move it to that and still put it into automatic. It'll still track the sun. It will not exceed the 24 feet in height. And so that's a non-issue.
Can you respond to the point that could be a safety issue with respect to the snow loads?
The snow is not going to sit on it, and the snow poundage is and I can get back to you on it, but I believe it was 100 pounds per square foot on the structure itself, and the wind loading is 105, which is above the wind loading for a house. So these things can take more wind load than a house can, and snow load was the same. It can sustain more snow load than a roof had to meet the IRC. So these are stout structures, to say it's unsafe because it's, and again, it is going to have a slight angle to it. So flat it's not going to hold a mound of snow. And then as far as the setting on snow dump, we pick either snow or wind. So we pick wind on every one of the systems because the wind is more concerning to us than the snow dump. So whenever the wind speed comes up, this does go flat. So it will never exceed whatever height that I set it at and set the parameters within the Peru. So the height is very easy to set as well, that it will not exceed the 24 feet. It just won't, because it's that easy. It's built into the program, so it's not a situation of we're not setting it up as the manufacturer instructed, because the manufacturer would not have given me the ability to set the tilt on the unit if that was the case, and it wouldn't operate and function correctly.
Okay, and can you also respond to the point about whether this is, I mean, the appellant's argument it's a commercial structure, which I'm not sure that's directly relevant, but the relevance is that is the question of whether the structure is so large that it's not subordinate to the residential use of the property. I think the appellants are arguing that this structure is, notwithstanding the fact that the size limitation was removed from the ordinance, that nonetheless this is so large as to not be subordinate. That is, it's not a residential type structure because it's so big. Do you have a response to that?
So we've installed 20 units in the surrounding towns. No town has balked at them. You probably don't even know they're located. Some of them are on a 1-acre lot. You just don't notice them. You know, so we've installed them in your surrounding towns. And Freeport was brought up that we went to the board in Freeport because they had a height restriction of 24 feet. And so we went to the board and said, listen, or we went to the planning board and gave them our for instance, with allowing this to tilt up a little further, and it was 6-1, and we had people coming out of the audience in favor. It was one meeting, it took about 25 minutes, and they zipped it through that this structure was something that they wanted in their town. North Yarmouth, Freeport, all these other towns are allowing us to put these in without even questioning anything. Nobody's been opposed, and Freeport certainly wasn't opposed. We simply went to increase the height, which was, again, it was a 30-minute, and we had more people that were in the audience that were there for other reasons that came up to speak highly of this and in favor.
I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that you do notice these things. I mean, there's one on Route 9 in North
Yeah.
Yarmouth as
Yeah.
you go through right before the White Pine Church on the left. It's very noticeable. But I think that the question is whether the ordinance in Cumberland allows it, and I think there's no question that and we as a board are bound by the laws adopted by the council. We can't decide
Yeah.
that this isn't allowed because it seems too commercial for us unless that that the evidence demonstrates to us that this is something that is not subordinate to the residential use of the property. That's really the question. And I guess what you're saying is because you've done a lot of these on residential properties, it's your view that it's not that it is subordinate to the residential use.
And the structure comparable to
even though it's large.
Yeah, in large is again, it's a little over 1,000 square feet. You know, you're talking a barn could be put up that is much larger than this on a property and still considered residential. And one other point I'd like to make is this, you know, it is still just a structure that houses solar on it. So let's just say that it wasn't producing power and is built as a lean-to situation. It would be a building permit and it'd be in and out. Metal walls that you can't see through. That this is elevated and it is pole mounted, but there's other the fact that it's producing power, I guess, is why we're here. But the size of it is the size of a large garage, you know, and there's much bigger structures that can be built on a property that aren't considered, you know, commercial structures in a residential zone. 1,000 or 1,100 square feet just isn't that big, and it really has. And I know, so the part of the big issue here is that my shop in Brunswick is I've got 3 of them located on, you know, about 1/3 of an acre, and my building is short. So it really makes them look good. They're big. They're right on the road. At the locations at the individual house lots that we've done, it's not so much in your face. So the presentation there is different. But the other part of the residential thing, just looking forward to the future, one of these units will cover an electric bill entirely. That's the goal. Every town has a sustainability committee so that we can be sustainable. You know, unfortunately, the roof systems negate at least 75% of all homes. They don't have enough roof surface, which was the case that at my house is why I put trackers up. I had Revision, I had Assured, I had them all come to my house. I didn't have enough square footage, I didn't have sun exposure, and I didn't have the right pitch. So basically, I couldn't have solar. It didn't work. I had them come out and put a ground mount out, and unfortunately, the ground mount is 3 times larger plus. So this is 1,000 square feet. We come out of the ground at a 30-inch sonotube. If we were to put the same kilowatts, which this is just taking care of a single house. This isn't like it's taking care of 3 houses. It's taking care of his bill, you know. And so if we were to put this on the ground, the footprint of his ground mount system would be 3 times larger on the ground. You're talking a very large system. They don't move, so you've got to separate them. So the shading is a big deal. So that footprint now, not only does it take up, and to me doesn't look as nice when it's on the ground, you get that many panels on the ground, and it is more of a safety issue. Now you've got DC power where kids and animals and all this stuff. To me, this is a win-win. We elevate it, so it's not a safety issue. It's a much smaller footprint because every panel is producing so much more power. So it's a very efficient use of space in a residential area. And so I don't think it's a commercial application, and what you're going to find is that these are going to be more and more popular because of the production. I'm going to list this stuff up here, but as an example, the production just today compared to, because my roof at my building is covered in solar. And the production is so much lower, and that's the reason I went to the trackers.
Okay, when you say you're going to leave some stuff up here, what do you mean? You're going to leave something?
Oh, I just have some comparables that I can.
If you want to offer them as evidence, we will accept them, but you need to distribute them to the board members if there's something you want to offer us. Leaving them on the table is not going to do any good.
Honestly, it has in my mind, it has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. I could sit here and tell you the pros and the cons of these all day long. What we're talking about is I will not encroach on setbacks, and I will not exceed 24 feet. I am going to be coming into the town of Cumberland to increase that. I will tell you right now, and there's a lot of reasons why I think that it's going to be beneficial. But until then, we will put it at an angle, which I'm assuming that my angle is going to be about 25 degrees, is my max height angle on this unit to keep it under the 24. So it's going to have a pretty good pitch to it when it tracks the sun, and it will not exceed the 24 feet, and it will not encroach on setbacks. And I believe that's the only reason we're here. Those 2 questions is really it.
Other questions for Mr. Keith? Mr. Black?
Yes, so what's the annual estimated production of energy for
This
this
is where we
at a
went pre-for.
25-degree angle?
You're gonna probably produce 35 kW a year, probably about $8,000 worth of power.
And how would that compare if it was unlimited?
Mr. Martin, could you just lean in your microphone a little bit so we can pick you up on the...
Sorry. And that's reduced because that number would be reduced because of the angle being limited?
Yeah, because the way solar works is you need to be perpendicular for your best gain. And so when the sun is perpendicular to a fixed array, like on a roof or something like that, it's where you get limited. These are bifacials as well, so in the wintertime, you get all kinds of reflective gain off the snow. But, so to stay perpendicular to the sun is the best. And so in the wintertime is when the sun is lower, so it's going to hit its highest pitch. In the summertime, it's actually quite flat almost the entire summer. They don't go to a steep pitch because the sun is so high so quick. So they'll stay quite a bit flatter in the summer months.
But what if you didn't have these limitations we're talking about now, that $8,000 worth of power, what would that be likely?
I mean, that's a hard guess, but again, I don't think, I think I'm gonna approach the planning board in the town to increase that, and I'll sell them on how much you're gonna lose, you know, if you're not able to put it up the pitch. But I'm at the zoning board, so I'm here to tell you it's not going to encroach on setbacks and it's not going to exceed your ordinance, and it meets all your ordinance specs. I could give you all the benefits of
I'm not
it
asking
tipping
for
up.
the benefits, I'm just asking what kind of a haircut the homeowner is taking by complying with our requirements. I'd like to know that.
If
suppose
I
it's-
had to throw a number out there, maybe 10%, 15%.
I mean, ultimately, it's up to the homeowner to decide if they're going to take too much of a haircut, they would not proceed with the project, I suspect.
Unless they're counting on it being changed.
Well,
If
at
that's-
some point.
Either way, the kilowatts, purchasing the kilowatts on, and that's what you're doing, not buying panels. Either way, purchasing the kilowatts on one of these trackers, the payback is so much faster. You're producing so much more power, and that's why I say I have real world, real time. So that's why it's going to be beneficial either way.
Mr. Black?
So you mentioned an angle of 25 degrees. There was evidence earlier that an angle of 7.4 degrees would reach the max height, I think of 23.9.
Yeah, I
Do
don't
you-
think that was.
No, no, you may not, but we'll give you an opportunity to respond.
Essentially, what's going to happen when I program this unit is we're going to throw a tape measure up there because when we set the pole, if we set it flush to the ground, it's going to give me a baseline to meet the 24 feet or just under. I would not go too close. So then I'm going to set that angle so that it sits right there, and that's going to be the maximum tilt angle. It has that option right in there for me to set the maximum tilt angle of this array.
So, just so I understand, because this is based on certain drawings here, and I think there's certain assumptions of how far the pole is actually set into the ground. But are you talking about setting the pole into the ground to where the lower side of the panel may be just a couple of feet above the ground?
That's what happens. Basically, we set it down. Most people do it so that they can get trucks and stuff underneath it or mow your lawn underneath it, but that's not necessary. We can get it so that it's much closer to the ground.
So let me ask you this, if it's set at a 25-degree angle at the lower end, how high will that be off the ground, do you estimate?
Oh, if I had to estimate, you're probably talking 6 feet to 7 feet.
Okay.
And don't hold me to any of these numbers because I really you.
And if it is in that far, and you tried to tilt it up to 60 degrees, could you even do that without hitting the ground?
Right, and that's why they give you the maximum tilt angle as an option on the Peru. When we set those, we set, again, I flattened one of mine out at my shop just so that it doesn't tip up so far so that I can get, 11 foot basically underneath clearance.
And can a homeowner, is there any way to override how you have it set?
So I have a password that I set in. So the password switches it in a manual. And when I set it up and commission the unit, I commission it to do that angle. And then I start it. For them to go in and do it, it would have to be me. And I will promise you that I'm not going back to go against that. I mean, I run a business. That would be horrible. So I go in and I set the parameters when we commission it. So when I set it, they're not going to be able to go in there and change it so that it goes above that 24 feet.
Mr. Kopp, do you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know if my question is for Mr. Keith or for the applicant himself, but in regards to the commercial term, what is the purpose of this project? Is it for residential or is it commercial?
Strictly residential, and that's really all we've done. We've done, I want to actually say we've done 22. We're starting another one in North Yarmouth tomorrow. We've got 2 more in North Yarmouth to do, and then we're going to back to Brunswick to do another one, and they're all in residential homes because, unfortunately, our power bills, everybody knows, they're going through the roof. And one of these units is without a massive roof that you can put a lot of panels on, you're just not taking care of 100% of your power bill. And if you take care of 40%, the increase in CMP is going to negate your payback. When CMP continues to go up and you're only doing 60% of your bill, it negates your investment. So that 100% of your bill is important, but 100% these days is a residential house on one of these units.
Is the size of this unit overkill for one residence?
Nope, that's basically what I'm saying. It's not, he's not gonna have extra at the end of the year. He's gonna be right there. And what's happening, and part of the reason I got into this is the heat pumps. So the heat pumps are what we're converting to. We're trying to get rid of fossil fuels. People convert to heat pumps, and if anybody here has heat pumps in their home and they run it, they know that in the wintertime that bill goes up substantially. To cover those kilowatts, you're just not gonna do it on a roof. Not without a massive, massive roof. And so that's why these are going to be more residentially seen than they are going to be. Yep, there's going to be some commercial. We've actually been approached by a couple of towns because these take up so much less ground area and they want to become carbon neutral that they're going to do 3 or 4 of these because they don't have the ability to do or don't want to do a solar farm that's fenced and danger and all this other stuff around it because it takes up so much square footage, the animals can't get in there, all these other reasons. These produce so much more power, it's much smaller. So in that application, there will be some commercial when you have 3, 4, 5 of them in one spot. But with CMP, actually, and we can talk about CMP. I didn't think about this until now, but CMP has a limit. 25 kW and over is level 2 for them. That's where it bumps up, where it's making more power. This is a 21 kW. This is a residential. In Central Maine Power's eyes, this is a residential system. And it's a simple application to them. They don't question anything. Most of the transformers handle this no problem, so that we're not upgrading anything in a residential home to install these units. And we're simply, it's actually putting in 100 amps. It's 100 amps. If you had 100 amp service at a house, we could install one of these units. Nowadays, you rarely see the 100 amps, but so it's not commercial in that aspect of the power.
Thank you.
There was discussion about proposed locations, and it sounds like it kind of changed a little bit through this process. So for the abutters, has that gone into consideration? Like, are you, I know
So,
that's,
and again, I guess I'll go into it a little bit, but even with my background, it's, the location, as long as we meet setbacks with these things, the ordinance governs that, so there, and what we do is we have apps, and the reason that it moves around, and it's not, and I do wish that we had initially been a little bit more detailed, and this is a learning curve for me. I'm going to be more detailed with the position of it, even if there is a whole lot of room to move around. We have a sun positioner app. And so we go there and we locate. Essentially, these things are so flexible that we take a look at the horizon of the trees. And wherever the horizon of the tree further back, I have an app that I can see where the sun dips down so that no trees have to be actually taken. And we can shuffle over 10 feet and get another 45 minutes of sunlight in that location. But we would never, because again, I'm on the hook for taking this thing back down, encroach on a setback if it's not. This is so easily hit. The setbacks are 15 feet, and I know that initially our plan wasn't super specific. It did give us some wiggle room, but in no way, shape, or form would I get so close to a setback that it's an issue. And we have tons of space over there.
Just to be clear, if you were to move this structure, the solar panel, presumably Mr. Longley, he'd need to get a new building permit, wouldn't he, if it changes the proposed?
No, we would have an amendment of the existing permit for a relocation.
Yeah.
So if he said he wanted it to be substantially different, I understood all along it was going to be in that general vicinity.
Yeah.
And the dimensions that were given were much longer dimensions to points that weren't as particular as the current setback shown.
Okay, thanks.
Ryan, would you mind just showing us where you think the proposed, just to verify it, please?
It's the most recent.
Just confirmation.
It's all right if I can move your slides. Yeah, I'll do it for you. It's that most recent is the most specific. It's in the vicinity of the initial permit. It just got more specific, but that's basically where that point was. And again, we got a 10 or 15 foot, gave ourselves 10 or 15 foot wiggle room. The base of this thing, it's a 30-inch sonotube. It's this big, and then so it's very easy to hit these dimensions from that center point, and to move over 6 feet is is easy. The hole we dig in the ground is only 4 feet deep, and it's 7 foot by 7 foot. This is not a monstrosity of a unit.
I guess the last thing is there was the word deed that came up. So this is not essentially encroaching on any abutters, and there's no need to change deeds, or it's not a part of an association
Nope.
or anything of that nature.
Absolutely not. And that's the reason that people buy into subdivision associations, where there's rules that they can actually govern what is in the association, so they protect themselves. And unfortunately, when you buy outside of an association, outside of a subdivision, you release those powers of that. Then what you're held to the town's ordinances that people vote on, and lots of people vote on. They put them in place, and that's what we're up against here is 15-foot setback and a 24-foot height, which is very easy to meet. That's yeah.
Okay, thank you.
These units are built to.
There was one more thing. I heard the word septic, and I just want to make sure, for some reason I thought I heard shared septic system, but that's not a shared system.
No, it's his system, and we are outside of, they even have what's called the toe of the fill, and we are well outside the distance of the septic. We are nowhere near encroaching on the septic at all.
Thank you.
Mr. Kopp?
Mr. Keith, on the construction of the system, will anything be transported or used on Hope's Way?
Nope. So we do need a concrete truck, and we do need a crane. And then we have our trailers and our little mini excavator that we use, and a small lift. But Dwight has an entrance that we get to come right off. We wouldn't cross. And if we ever had to cross someone else's property, we were absolutely talk to them first. But we don't have to touch anybody else's property to get in there from Hope's Way. Yep.
Other questions for Mr. Keith or the applicant? If not, okay, thank you, Mr. Yeah, Mr. Lindeman? Yeah, yes. Well, I think now's your chance. Yep.
This one, right?
Yeah, thanks.
You got it.
I'd just like to thank everybody for this. I can't tell you how, this has been a really interesting process for me and very kind of saddening. I've had really great relationships with my neighbors, I thought. And I would just like to point out, Justin did an incredible job researching the unit and doing all that, but at no time did he reach out to me, to reach out to Ryan, to talk to him. I sent a text to Doug saying, Doug, let's meet with you and Kelly and let's discuss where to put this. At no time were we ever worried about septics. We knew where they were. I went out and found all the posts. I was going to get it surveyed if I couldn't. So we were taking care of all of the septic issues. The reason why there's been some ambiguity about where it was going was I was trying to be accommodating to the Masons' property. The other folks, I'm sorry, it didn't occur to me to talk to you because you don't abut me. You're over 300 feet away. It didn't occur to me. I was very concerned about Kelly.
Mr. Deckelman, could you just direct your comments to us?
I'm sorry, I was very concerned about the Masons, and so I looked at their house. I looked where I was initially going to put it. It was going to lose a third of its potential. So I would have liked to put it in a different spot. The property line wasn't where I thought it was, but it's in a place where they do see it. They see it when they come and go, but it's kind of out of sight from their porch, and it's kind of out of sight from their front porch, and it's out of sight from their back porch. The other, my other neighbors, there's a tree in between where their new front porch went in. Justin is down over a hill. So we're talking mostly, this is a NIMBY, not my backyard situation, where they don't want to see it, but they haven't taken the time to go out. I offered Doug, let's go out and see these in nature. I took pictures of them where you would be standing on their property looking at it, and they do shrink. They're a two-dimensional kind of object. They're not a box. They blend in, and their wonderful view, which I appreciate, is my house. So it's not their yard that I'm taking up. And this is a big view from my house. This will meet 100% of my energy needs now and what I project. I've changed to heat pumps. I've changed to geothermal. I run 2 electric cars. I am off the grid with this in a greenhouse. There is, it's really, and all, they're worried about their property value, but I will lose, if this doesn't go through and I don't do solar here, and I have other options to do solar here, which would interfere highly with the Masons, who I've tried to avoid. My property line is 30 feet from the corner of their garage. That was not my choice. That was their choice. They built their house 30 feet from the property line. I have 2 acres in the back that I avoid using. This. Anyway, no, it bugs me. I really value friendship. But anyway, so I'm an emotional guy. Anyway, so that's my point, is that we really tried. And I was trying to place it in a way that would work with them. And they just refused. I mean, utterly dug their heels in and refused to meet with me. Justin replied in a text, I would rather communicate via email. Now a desire to really get to the bottom of this. Anyway, so it will meet 100% of our needs. It's in our view too, so it's not like it's over our hill and we don't see it. The house has been there for 200 and some odd years. To meet your size, we have 1,000 square foot porch, covered porch. So it's small, as same size as my porch. If I put solar panels on my porch, it would be the same area. I'm just saying, but unfortunately my porch doesn't view the sun.
Okay, I don't think I asked you to state your name for the record. It's Dwight.
Oh, Dwight Deckelman.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's my fault. Any questions for Mr. Deckelman? If not, okay. Yep. Mr.
So,
Black.
Mr. Deckelman, so do you have any problems with the restrictions that were put in place by the building permit that was issued to you?
Oh, no, no, it pencils out. I mean, as long as, it goes through its rotations and we lose that 10 to 15%, it's still producing, it's borderline. I mean, it would be obviously better if it were producing 100% its potential, and I'm hoping that Ryan does come before the board and change that ordinance. I mean, the funny thing about stuff like this is, most of this is ignorance. The 3 feet that you're talking about is lower than the peak of a barn you could build there, and it's just not that visible. This is more about not wanting something that they just don't want to see this thing. So there could be far worse things there that would be higher. But I would prefer that it would go to work at its potential.
But you could live with the restrictions put in place, that it can't be above the 24 feet?
Oh, yes, I would intend to.
Okay.
I mean, we've been clear about that from the very beginning. We knew that was the orient. We're hoping that it will change, but it does a much better job for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Just
One more from Mr. Kopp?
a brief one. I'm not familiar with these things. On the horizontal turn of the thing, not the elevation, not the vertical, but horizontal, how many degrees would you say it follows the sun? Does it turn halfway or?
Yeah, its potential is the 270, but it doesn't. It's just, it follows the sun, so wherever the sun comes up and sets, in the wintertime, that span is much less than in the summertime. It's a little bit more, but if I had to guess, it's probably only 190, somewhere around there. But it's sunrise and sunset, that's it. And so there's 2 options. You can choose, when I do the parameters, to set it to the light sensing, or you choose GPS. And when you choose GPS, it is data logged in there that for that longitude, latitude, which I have to include when I set the parameters, it knows exactly where the sun's going to come up at that location on the Earth and exactly where it's going to go down. And so it's a little bit more than 180, but not much.
And I'd also like to add, just be trying to be neighborly on this. along with that is like, what kind of plantings can we put around the backside of it to make it work? I mean, I feel like I tried very hard to reach out and minimize whatever potential impacts they perceived. And I feel like it was just a heels in the ground, not in my backyard, more than anything else.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Before I ask the appellants, Mr. Levesque, to respond, I would like to ask anyone from the public first would anyone like to speak, first off, in favor of the appeal, that is, against the permit? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, I'm Shirley Story King, retired town councilor and retired town ordinance chair. And I just want to give some perspective on this request. First of all, the height restriction was not arbitrary. It's consistent with other height restrictions within the town. So that was kind of a flippant response. Sorry, I should. It's obvious Ryan, Mr. Keith, loves his product. But this is a commercial product. This is not marketed anywhere else except by Ryan, perhaps, as a commercial product. And if it were to go through a commercial permitting process, it would be going to the planning board. And none of those steps were followed. Additionally, a structure of this size, if it were to be built there, I believe it would require a 30-foot setback because it's in the rural residential zone. And 15 feet is for sheds and small buildings, but 30 feet setbacks are required for larger.
Primary structures.
Right. And this is, if it were a barn, like they said, it would have to be 30 feet. So that's something to consider as well. But we did not, the ordinance committee did not undertake the commercial aspect of solar arrays yet, and maybe they will. I've spoken to both Mike Eads and Bob Vail about this issue. They continue to be on ordinance committee. We had a proposal in West Cumberland for a commercial solar setup on private property that we rejected. The commercial solar project that went down on Route 1 with the former Maine standards had to go through planning board approval. So I'm just saying that this clearly, to me, is an industrial, commercially sized property. Whether Ryan markets it that way or not, it's not marketed as a residential property by the manufacturers. The 24 and 42 unit solar panels are residential. A 48 is a commercial industrial. And I believe they were built primarily for agriculture, for people to be able to run their irrigation systems in the middle of a field or to power a campground in the middle of the woods. So that's my perspective, and I just wanted to share those considerations with you.
Thank you, Ms. Story King.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for?
Yeah, so do you disagree with the representation that this puts out enough power essentially to power this one house? You think that's wrong?
I can't say because I'm not an expert on this. What I can say for us to consider, if you're considering the green argument, I want you to consider the forever chemicals that exist in solar power panels and in heat pumps. So while you might be going green, you are flooding our environment with forever chemicals as well.
Seems like
So
a
that-
whole other argument to me.
I know, it's a
that-
slippery slope, right?
I think you're on it.
Any other questions? Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of the appeal? Yes.
I'm Tim Cairns. I live at 11 Cumberland Common. I'm not in a butter. I don't live in this neighborhood. I just found out about this issue yesterday, and pretty randomly. So I wrote a whole bunch of notes, but I'm just going to report out what hasn't been said so far. My concern is the precedent this sets. Mr. Longley had mentioned that this was a unique proposal, the first pole-mounted one in Cumberland. And it looks like, from what I can tell, I haven't seen many of these, but the drawings were dots and scribbles, and the secondary ones look like doodles. So I'm a little concerned how fast that got approved. I live in the center of town on Cumberland Common. I don't know how many of our residents around me would plan on doing this in the future. It sounds like from the salesman that he's a go-getter and plans to expand his operations. So I'm a little concerned about the height of that. And there's this saying of not in my backyard, but I think there's a crude way of saying we don't want to change the character of our surroundings. And I agree with that. I do feel that way. So I think, you know, if the, so I have a concern with the precedent this sets as far as future buildings go. And I think of how fast that was approved, and it worries me about, you know, what will happen in my neighborhood next. So the other thing is Mr. Longley's comment of he approved it, but he put in a facet in there that said it had to lay flat, and then he just had the builder say it is most likely going to be tilted. So those things seem to conflict. So it looks like that rule won't be followed, as you just heard. The safety issue, Mr. Levesque did a great presentation, mostly about snow and wind. My concern, living in the center, we have a lot of small kids around. I can just picture one of these things in my neighbor's backyard. It looks like a perfect surface for a snow fort. And we heard about how strong these things are. I don't think the manufacturer would recommend kids on these things or underneath them. So I think it's something to be considered as far as I can't see an issue with a ground-mounted device. I can't see an issue on the roof, but I could just picture that. So I think just again, for other areas rather than, there's a lot of fields and woods out here, but I'm thinking about my neighborhood. So that's it. And you know, the other information we heard about how easy it is to take these things down if the rules are violated, if the setbacks are violated, if the height is violated. I think it probably is common sense, but most of that information is coming from the person who's selling the equipment. So I think that has to be taken into consideration. So I'd urge this group to rescind the building permit for further study. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cairns. Any questions for Mr. Cairns? Mr. Longley?
I just have a point of clarification. I'll read the restriction on the permit because there's some misunderstanding. When I gave the description, it would be more closer to flat. It wasn't that it would be exactly flat. It's that the 24-foot could not be attained if it were up in the up position. I'll read my condition on the permit. Installation of a 48-panel solar array on dual-axis tracker. Tracker will not exceed 24 feet per the ordinance. This is issued subject to the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Codes in the IRC 2015 as adopted by the state of Maine. So that just answers a couple of misinformations that were out there, is that it had to stay flat all the time. It cannot exceed 24 feet is a more correct statement, and that it's IRC 2015 as adopted by the state of Maine. Just 2 points of order.
Thank you, Mr. Longley. So we've been at this now for 2 hours, and I need a break. So maybe we could just take about 5 minutes and then convene back here at 5 past. That's all right? So we can go off the air temporarily.
Anybody want a water? Yeah, water. Ron, would you just also?
No, no thanks.
Matt, water?
Yeah, that'd be great, actually. Thank you.
Mike, water? Sure.
All right, I'm going to call this meeting back to order. So we were on public testimony, public comments in favor of the appeal. Yes, sir, why don't you go ahead? State your name for the record.
Thank you. I'm Dave Brown. I'm a recent resident of Cumberland. And the only point I would make from what I've heard, this whole thing is not all the details, but this is a huge structure. It's not a barn or a house or anything else anybody's used to. We go through great detailed processes on, when we build anything that's sort of normal, and to have this happen in one quick day, given all of the information we've investigated tonight, seems not proper, in which case it would seem that it's subject to further review with all of the details and the drawings. To have just a sketch and say we're going to build this giant thing for the first time seems not correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions for Mr. Brown? If not, yes, sir. State your name for the record.
Yeah, I'm Robert Timberlake. I live 125 Tuttle Road. I've been there about 11 years. Actually, I moved back there 11 years ago. I grew up there where my parents built the house in 1952. I also think that this is a huge commercial structure that, although it can be programmed to go lower, that means it also can be programmed to go higher. And sooner or later, someone is going to want to put it up higher because it will be more efficient when it's tilted higher to get more sunlight, especially in the wintertime. I just think it's out of keeping with the residential character of Tuttle Road, where I live, to have a structure of this size put in. I like solar. I have a solar hot water system on my roof. I don't object to the solar trackers that I've seen. I've gone around them down at Gilsland Farm, where I like to go to see birds. It's the Audubon Center down in Falmouth. There are 3 units there. None of them are higher than the top of my house when they're extended. This thing will be considerably higher if it goes up, and it's just out of keeping with the character of the neighborhood. So I urge the reconsideration of the proposal, and I support those who want to try to have another look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timberlake. Any questions for Mr. Timberlake? If not, is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the appeal? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Linda McDonald. I'm a realtor with Sotheby's, and I was asked very objectively by Mr. Mason when I was shown a picture of the solar tracker if it would affect a property value. And it was very easy for me to answer that it unequivocally would. And I understand that it may meet setbacks and that there are height restrictions that it can meet, but the size and the 1,139 square feet of this has a very, very commercial aesthetic to it that feels very different than everything that every client that I have ever taken through the Tuttle Road area is looking for, or what they expect from that area. Just wanted to be on record with that.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Any questions for Ms. McDonald? If not, would anyone else like to speak in favor of the appeal? Would anyone like to speak in opposition to the appeal, that is, in favor of the permit? And is there anyone else who would like to speak neither for nor against the appeal? If not, then I would ask Mr. Levesque or Mr. Mason or Mr. Goding if they would like to respond to any of the comments that have been made so far by the permittee or anyone else.
I can briefly respond. So it's great we got some more information as to if it would actually move and it would actually tilt. I do want to come to one part of my presentation that I had in mind to discuss regarding that. Let me just get to that point. Bear with me. this point number 5. So it's going to move and it's going to tilt, but it's not going to tilt above 24 feet. So how will that affect now our solar glare to our properties? Considering this is actually not in our backyards, it's in our front yards. So it's not a NIMBY issue, it's a NIM-fee issue. And I'm going to be the first person to say I don't want it in my front yard. So I will go on the record of saying that. I think that point 5 is especially important, not just to the neighbors, and I think it's important being on record now for posterity, going back to this first slide, which I also put in here for a reason. Pretty open here.
Mr. Levesque, yeah, we need to pick you up on the microphone.
Yep. Sorry about that. I'll use the laser pointer. So it's very open. We've established that. Many people have talked better than I can about the aesthetic of the area, Tuttle Road, its rural nature. That's great. I'm trying to look at it as low as a more practical perspective regarding the law and regarding the ordinance listed in Chapter 232. Tracker's going to go over here. The sun rises over here and typically goes this way as well. There will be glare as the tracker points and moves going this way. Maybe the glare won't affect us very much, but the potential is there with the bifacial panels on the opposite side. But glare can also go this way and also impact potentially folks driving
Mr.
along.
Levesque, could I just ask, are you making this as an additional argument why the permit should not have been granted because of glare on a neighboring property? And if so, we didn't hear this in I don't recall hearing it in your initial presentation or in your written materials.
I understand, and so.
And I'm a little concerned because we haven't had evidence on this from the
Understood.
permittee either.
So I really don't have anything else to add. Everybody else said everything very eloquently, so I don't have anything else to say.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Levesque? I'll let you, it looks like Mr. Keith wants to speak again. I will let him speak because you've raised this new issue and he probably wants to respond to it. And then I'm going to give you another opportunity to respond to him.
Mostly it's for education. They've done tons of studies, and solar panels actually absorb light. They don't glare. And if you'll think about going up 295 in the highway and along the roads, we place them along the roads because that's been proven that solar panels don't glare. They absorb light. And that's why we're able to put them in all these medians as cars drive by without issue. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Keith. Mr. Levesque, do you have anything further you'd like to say, or? Okay. Any further questions for the appellants or the applicant? If not, I'm going to close the public portion and we'll begin our deliberations. If someone wants to make a motion, we could start that way to, no? Oh, no. Oh, I'm sorry. I probably should have given you, I assume Mr. Levesque was speaking for all the, okay.
I was speaking for myself. Doug is also on.
All right, if you're one of the appellants, I want to give you an opportunity to respond. So yes, I'm going to reopen the public portion and allow you to briefly respond.
Okay. I was wondering, Doug Mason again, I was wondering why we can't have why none of them are 30-foot setbacks? Why do we have to push it all the time with the 15 when there's enough property there?
Right. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Mason. Mr. Goding, do you have anything further you'd like to say?
No, I just agree with Justin. It's not in the backyard. It's right in front of my house. So I'm looking directly at it every day.
Okay. Thank you. And with that, no, no, because the process is what the process is, and I think I need to cut it off at this point, Mr. Deckelman. So with that, I am going to close the public portion, and now we will begin deliberations. So would anyone like to either make a motion one way or the other, or just begin deliberations? We don't have to have a motion.
Well, I think for purposes of argument, it's best to have a motion on the table.
It would be
So,
helpful, I think, yeah.
And I don't know if you want the motion in the affirmative or to,
Usually we would do them in the affirmative. It probably doesn't matter, but I think we would usually say to grant the appeal, and then if, yeah, and then, so, I mean, it's up to you.
Do you want it, well, I would say we'd make a motion to grant the application, okay? But I know
think
we
so.
have an issue there,
Yeah.
so, but I'll, if it's okay to make it in the negative, I would say to deny, I make a motion to deny the appeal.
Yep, sure. Okay, is there a second? Does anyone want to?
I'll second.
Mr. Martin is seconded. So the motion on the table for discussion is to deny the appeal of the building permit at issue. And there's a second. Who would like to begin discussion?
I just have a point of clarification. Is the difference between a residential and a commercial solar panel, is it the number of the panels that determines whether it's residential or commercial?
So
As Ryan had mentioned, the CMP, that's what I took away from it. It was under the commercial aspect of it.
that Mr. Keith mentioned that CMP does not treat this as commercial, in other words. He
Correct.
treats the energy production as residential. I think it's an interesting question. Now, there's a question as to whether or not this is really before us, because the appellant raised two issues in their appeal, but I think they effectively raised this. So the question is whether or not this is allowed. I don't know that we don't really have to label this, right? We don't have to label this as a commercial. The appellants want us to label it because if it's commercial, it doesn't seem like it fits here. The question is whether this thing is allowed under the solar provisions of the ordinance. And I think that the only argument, I mean, whether it's, whether the manufacturer calls it commercial, whether other people call it commercial, it doesn't really matter as long as it's allowed under the solar ordinance in the residential zone. And that question turns on the question which I think Mr. Levesque did thoroughly discuss, which is does the structure here, because of its commercial nature or size, really more importantly, somehow subordinate the residential use of the property? That is, does it predominate on the property because it's so huge? And, I think that's a question that we can struggle with. However, I would say this, that with respect to the size, the town council adopted this ordinance, and we are bound by the ordinance, right? We can't decide this is something that's commercial, we don't like it in the residential zone, if the town council decided to allow it here. The question is whether the town council did allow it, and they did remove the size restriction, right? They had a size restriction, which they removed. That tells us something. It tells us that we can't necessarily decide that the size of this structure is directly relevant to whether it's subordinate to the primary use of the property, right? So it seems to me that it's a tough argument that this is not subordinate to the primary use of the property. Now, if it somehow I mean, we can decide that. If somehow we think it is just, its nature is that it subordinates the residential use. But the fact that the ordinance allows it on its face makes that, I think, a more difficult argument. But, other people may have other thoughts on that. Other comments? How about on the setback issue? Any comments on the setback issue?
So, well, I'll just
Oh, yeah, go to.
comment generally. Again, let me just first reiterate, I do think the applicant for the permit has the burden in this case, and I think that they have met that burden. The issues that I think we're constrained to looking at are what the town council has said to us by adopting the ordinance, issues about whether it's consistent or in keeping with the general neighborhood character of the neighborhood. I think that's all irrelevant. The town council has decided that that's not a factor that we're supposed to consider. We are supposed to consider the height, and all indications are that this will be set to where it will not exceed the 24 feet height, and the offset is the 15 foot from any point, and I think that was demonstrated, that was met as well. So I don't think there was really a lot of burden that they needed to to meet, and I think they did. So,
Other comments? Anything?
and I'll also just comment on the subordinate piece of this. I think there's no indication that this is not subordinate to the property on the commercial piece of this. There is no indication that the use of this energy is for anything other than the residential property itself. There's no indication that they're going to put up some charging station or something and make it a commercial enterprise. And I think even under the CMP net metering laws, that CMP only reimburses you for up to what you actually use. So you can't go and use this as a means of making money from CMP. So for all those reasons, I don't think it's, I think it is subordinate to the property.
I would just weigh in agreement with all that. It's not our position as the Board of Appeals to decide what's right, what makes the most sense for the town from a solar energy perspective. We have to follow the ordinance. We're bound by the ordinance. It may be that if there were a change to the ordinance, that this would no longer be allowed. But quite frankly, it meets the setbacks. It meets the height restriction. It does not subordinate to the it does not subordinate the residential use. And that's the restriction. That's the limit on our jurisdiction here. We can't decide we don't like it because it doesn't seem to fit in to this location. That's just what this board is bound by. The board is bound by the provisions in the ordinance that were adopted by the town council. Does anyone else disagree with that? Anybody want to?
I agree 100%. Well said.
Me too.
Okay, then hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion to deny the appeal, raise your hand. It is unanimous, 6-0. Thank you for your presentations tonight. It was all well done, and we appreciate all the time that everyone took here. So with that, we will move on to our next item of business. Mr. Longley, are we going to, at some point, we're going to maybe have a written decision that we can sign on this, do you think, or maybe?
I've taken some notes, and I'll try to put together some of the information that you gave, and there will be some minutes done by Christina when she returns, and we will work to get something.
Yeah.
If we can just, on the original that you have in front of you, we'll note that the appeal was denied,
Yeah.
and then have the board members sign, and then we can do the finding of fact at a later date and submit by email if that's okay with you.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, we can do that. I'm just thinking we may want to state the bases for our decision. I mean, they're pretty clear in the record, but.
I took the notes as Andrew and you both talked, and there'll be a recording of it. It's totally up to you, sir, if you want to do a finding, we can do a finding, or.
I did that?
We wait and see. All right, so now, the next item of business is the minutes from the May 13, believe it or not, 2021 meeting, which is somewhat shocking. That's the last time we met? Wow.
Bill's doing his job.
Yeah,
love
exactly.
this
Thank you.
committee.
Thank you, Mr. Longley. Much appreciated. So I looked at the minutes. I couldn't remember much of it other than it had to do with the name of a street, but it looked okay to me.
It's a little foggy with COVID.
Yeah, that's true too, right. Oh my
Long
gosh.
COVID.
Yeah, long COVID.
Is there a hard copy in these materials?
There is, Matt has the hard copy for the minutes.
Okay, yes, maybe, all right.
If I could just take
Oh,
a quick.
I think it's in here.
I don't know
There may be a copy in the submittal as well.
There it is.
if I saw that or not.
It's that, yeah, that
didn't
might
see
be the
it.
last page of it to sign. I'm supposed to sign it. It was, I think it was attached. I did read through it, so it must have been attached to what.
It had to do with the road naming by
Oh,
the
I
assessor and the
remember
police
meeting.
and the
I think
fire.
it was
and-
3 years ago,
Yeah,
but,
it was the road naming.
yeah.
Did we disagree on this one?
I think we did.
I'm feeling like.
I was in the minority.
I'm
feeling like
50-50. I'm
maybe
50-50.
Maybe you fell on your sword for that one. I can't remember exactly. Yeah.
I think Sally and I were the two that were in the minority on that one, actually.
Yeah.
So,
I'm used to that.
There you go. Oh, yeah, 4 yeas, 2 nays. Rebecca Pierce, look at that. All right,
I
do
don't
we
know
have a?
why I named it.
I don't know if I was there for
No.
I don't think I
My-
was either.
Ah.
Who was there,
Yeah, so
Matt?
I'm
You-
in this.
List the names on the first page.
Yeah, it was me, Andrew, Ron, Peter Lacy, Chris Lewis, both of whom have left the board.
Both gone.
And then Sally, so yeah.
So the three of you that
Well, I'm in
are,
trouble
think I
now.
can
Now that
abstain.
Peter and Chris are gone, I'm in trouble. Anyway, could I have a motion to approve the minutes as
Make a motion to approve the minutes of 21.
May 13, 21? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes as written? So for those of us who were here,
Four.
unanimous of those of us who were here in 2020, at the meeting in 2021. Okay, I think that is it. Any other business to come before the board?
Nope.
If not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning?
Yeah.
It's unanimous. Okay, we can go off the air. Thank you, Mr. Sturgis.
I think Chris Lewis has actually moved to Virginia.
Yeah, yes, yeah.